I'm resident of Collinwood, Joel Sains, joined by the author of the Dark Shadows Daybook, Patrick McCray. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I am fine as frogs here.
we're, we're here to do 1841 Parallel Time. I believe this is episode 1223, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Grayson Hall narrates this episode, or she does the opening narration. You know what I find really interesting about this episode is not just more obviously Morgan Collins, Keith Prentice is playing a completely different character in James Forsythe, which I love. The possession is very well executed here. Um,
9/10 of the law.
absolutely. Um, I really, really like the other dynamic you have going on with it's not though the sole focus is on Keith Prentice's Morgan Collins's possession in this story, you still have the importance of these the Stokes family in this episode too. Carrie Stokes,
Yeah.
Kathy Cody steals this episode. Really, what did you think of this? The opening is really well done, and just Keith Prentice, what an amazing actor.
Okay, yeah, Keith really earns his combat pay here by not shouting. This is one of the things that we said that his portrayal of James Forsythe is different. It's a different person. And some of that's the writing, of course, but a lot of that's in the choices he's making. And his strange sense of superiority
Yeah.
and kind of omniscience, knowing everything that is going on or thinking he does, um, is very, very, very new for him and new for the show. The other thing that I like, I just forgot, but it was great. It was something I really enjoyed. I think bringing up a lot of questions about Flora Collins was interesting in this through Melanie's search.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that generally, if we go back to Vertigo, which is just a master text for Dark Shadows, and if you have you seen Vertigo?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the Barnabas Maggie story,
Yeah.
and so often in, I think, these types of stories, none of which I can cite, is that it is the woman who is haunted by a spirit from the past.
Yeah.
And the man is trying to break through and all of that. And I don't see a man haunted by a spirit from the past very often. And it really changes kind of the rhythm and dynamics that we've come to expect. I like that.
Yeah. Vertigo is a really great movie if you haven't seen it. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock.
It's
Um,
essential for Dark Shadows fans.
yeah, it
It
really
really
is.
is.
If you haven't checked out Vertigo and you're a Dark Shadows fan, we highly recommend you do. James Stewart, my God, in that movie, Kim Novak, I believe. But
Yeah.
you in this episode, I really like how Keith Prentice, in the prior episodes, when you look at a character like Morgan Collins, Morgan is somebody who needed to feel superior, where this
James
character,
is.
yeah, and James Forsythe is a character who is very playful. he's
Mm-hmm.
he's very he feels like he has, like you said, he feels like he has all the information. So he's a bit arrogant, but he's
Mm-hmm.
not so overly arrogant either. I love how he's looking out the window. He's looking at the cottage, the gatehouse. Sorry, I'm used to calling it the cottage, but the gatehouse, and because it was Matthew Morgan's cottage in another timeline. But here it's called the gatehouse, and the Stokes family lived there. Carrie Stokes and her dad, and you have this situation where he's looking out and he says, who lives there? And Catherine Heritage Collins, Morgan's wife, answers him because she's trying to, and again, I love this dynamic too. Catherine still believes that she can reach her husband because deep down she really does not believe in that. I love
She's
it.
an eternal optimist.
I love it though because it brings a sense of hope to this episode. You know, because we've talked about how she's a doubting Thomas and how she's very different, and it's a refreshing change and a refreshing character to watch. It really is, even in this episode here, because I don't think it's a point of she doesn't want to accept reality. She wants to have hope that she can reach her husband, which is
Yes.
nice to see.
Yes. And it's nice to see a skeptic portrayed well.
Yeah.
Because, so often in the media, the skeptic exists to kind of rain on everyone's parade. And other people who really believe have, the opportunity for everyone to sort of golf clap their childlike sense of wonder and so on and so forth. And in this story, we see people making themselves miserable because of what they believe.
Yeah.
And the voice of reason comes along and is specifically trying to make everyone happier with what heretofore is reality.
Yeah. I really like the fact too, you touched upon it. You have Melanie in this episode. She's trying to find out about her past, and her her conversations with Flora, her conversations with Julia in this episode is really good. And I love the
Yes.
fact that you have somebody who's actually coming closer and closer, not too close, but in this episode they're inching their way to finding out information that they want to know. They find a piece of paper in Justin Collins's room, and Julia Collins does a very good job saying, well, that letter's to Flora, which, I mean, it could be, but it's really, really well done. And I really like it how Dark Shadows always had multiple storylines going on in arcs, because it sort of reminds me of wrestling, where instead of building just one character, you're building every character within an arc,
Yes.
that with different stories within an arc, which is really nice to see. And it's nice to see that Dark Shadows continues that here throughout 1841 with Melanie, who's Nancy Barrett has made a really interesting character.
Very much so.
Well,
Yeah, and it's nice that she still has it in her by playing. So, Nancy Barrett is someone who has been very good at playing increasingly kind of saucy, self-assured characters.
yeah,
And it's nice for her to be able to take that sense of confidence and put it in a more fragile vessel. That's a combination of elements we haven't seen as much or as recently. We've seen depression and fragility, but this sense of a fearful determination to solve mysteries and problems, that's a heavy combination. And she handles it, I think, very well.
I like how they make Melanie the youngest here, and Nancy Barrett does look like the youngest of all
Well,
of them.
I mean, gosh, I think she was 19 or something when she started on the show, or early 20s. It was Kate Jackson who was 19.
Uh, I want to say that with her performance, they're really good, and I like again, Melanie still knows about the room. She discussed it in the prior episode with Kendrick Young. Here, she's not focused on the room. She's focused on herself, and it doesn't demean the character at all. It doesn't make her look self-centered. It makes you sort of root for her in every way.
This is one more mystery we got to solve.
Yeah, and it's really a great job by the writers too. I feel like I'm not giving them enough credit, but really great writing.
I think this is the Gordon Hall arc. Or Gordon Hall, what a name. Gordon Russell arc,
Yeah.
where it's this long chain of episodes written, I believe, by Gordon, almost unbroken, that Sam had a long run at one point prior to this, but all the weight, I believe, has been on Gordon's shoulders.
I have a question for you. And I don't know if I asked this during this whole time, so if I did, I apologize. But was Grayson Hall's character Julia Collins, was she supposed to be more of a antagonist in this arc, you think?
Well, I think they write with certain amounts of potential energy. You know, they have this stuff planned out weeks and weeks ahead.
Right.
So there's only so much, but okay, well, what do we do in the next chunk of weeks? And if we write the potential for this character to more easily than others go in this direction, then we've set that up. And I think they were setting that up.
Yeah. I really like, I mean, her character is very interesting because there's times she acts very suspicious and very shady, which I love Grayson Hall's facial features and the way she sells that. I mean, she does a really great job. I mean, she has throughout this series ever since she came on. And just, again, more a great veteran actress who knows how to use her face and just her expressions to sell, you know, this sort of that makes you raise eyebrows at her character, and it's really just a great job.
I spent a lot of time in both daybooks talking about why Grayson Hall is such a great actor. And a lot of people come down on her fear face and those fear moments, that kind of thing. But at the same time, at a certain point, how are you supposed to act these things? These things that no one ever experiences, that no one ever sees. And, you know, what is the basis for realism, you know, in that? Or what's the basis for truth? And, you know, I always believe in the truth of what Grayson Hall is doing. And fear, I don't think was a necessarily easy thing for her to play because she was such a gutsy woman in real life.
Yeah. I think Dark Shadows doesn't get enough credit for with the actors and actresses is their facial expressions, because it didn't always give you a hint of what the character was thinking. Sometimes it did, but there's those moments of there's fear, there's reaction to something you've never seen before, and again, here's a character who also knows everything about that, or not necessarily knows everything about the room, but knows that the room is cursed, that the Collins family is under this curse. So for her to say, you know, Morgan is possessed, and she says it so naturally. She says it so naturally because it's happened with Melanie too.
Yeah, I mean, there's precedent. Precedent,
and you know, Gabriel too. I mean, Gabriel's possessed too. That's the one thing that you see that is a commonality with people who go in the room. You have Melanie who gets, but now Melanie never loses the water drawing, but Melanie goes in. For those who don't know, Melanie goes in a room after her father Justin, who you know, because she was in the room and he's collapsed. She went in to get him, and so she ends up crazy for the process. She ends up mad in the process, or possessed, if you will. And here's
I will.
And then when Gabriel loses, he ends up possessed as well. Plus, now you have Morgan, who is possessed. Juliet Collins has seen some stuff, and it is crazy good. Crazy good. What did you think of this episode overall?
I felt like it was a very thoughtful, calm after the storm.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you know, plays are about consequences. TV and movies are about actions, except for Dark Shadows, which is about consequences. And so this is a real meditation on two levels of consequences. One, the consequence of what happened to James Forsythe, and two, the consequence of what happened to Morgan Collins, and how that, you know, that is living in the present.
It's something Dark Shadows has done ever since its very inception. There's always consequences for an action, or for an inaction, if you will. So Dark Shadows has always dealt in these consequences, and there's going to be a consequence. Trust me, Catherine's going to get her own consequence too.
She's all about consequences right now.
She really is. And she's really, I love how Keith Prentice, who's being James Forsythe, locks her in the room. He sneaks out like a sneaky little devil. You can tell Keith Prentice is just having way too much fun playing James
It
Forsythe.
is fun. It's a fun group of actions to be able to play. And Prentice really, I think, deals with that in a did I freeze?
I could hear you.
Beautiful. And Keith Prentice plays it with a lot of elan and life.
Yeah. Really great job by him. I like how, even though Bramwell isn't in this episode, Bramwell is mentioned in this episode. So they're keeping Bramwell, Jonathan Frid's character, relevant by mentioning him, that Bramwell's been informed that Morgan went into the room, and nothing further. But
Are you ever tempted to say Jonathan Frakes instead of Jonathan Frid? Because I'm always on the verge.
actually, when I did a recording one time, now this did not make my channel, but because I do a lot of goof ups in my recordings, I did say Jonathan Frakes for Jonathan Frid for Barnabas, and I know I should have just let it go, but now I'm like, nah, I can't let it go.
Yeah, I know the feeling. What was your favorite scene in the episode?
Oh my God, there's so many, but I got to give it to Kathy Cody. I mean, just a great job, just selling the trance. I know she's been doing it for a while in this arc, but it with Keith Prentice playing a completely 180 character, and I love how Keith Prentice sells it as James Forsythe. He sells the trance. He's like, what are you doing? And he calls her Carrie too. So, and they come in her, Julia Collins, what did you do to her? I didn't do nothing to her, which she's telling the truth. But
if you had a video game with Carrie Stokes, parallel time Carrie Stokes,
yeah,
versus Barnabas Collins in the I Ching, would you call it Trance Revolution?
absolutely.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Well, so that was both your favorite scene and your favorite character in this episode?
Definitely. Very, again, there's a lot of great scenes in this episode, so it's hard to pick just one, but I'll pick that one because I really love how Kathy Cody has come into her own here.
Yeah, it's a very confident performance and a very different, it's not just a different character, it's a different performance than what she was doing about a year ago.
Yeah, it was. What's your favorite scene there?
Morgan sneaking out of the room is a lot of fun, and just the first dialogue of discovery that Catherine has with him, where she's really putting together what's happening, and watching Forsythe choosing what information to share, what information not to, and trying to figure out why.
Yeah,
I like that.
He's being very selective of what he says, which is so sneaky and so good. He does it better as James Forsythe than he does Morgan. I'll say that.
I agree.
Which, again, I think because he's having a lot more fun being James Forsythe than more so Morgan. I also love in this episode because we've seen Justin Collins as a ghost, and they're still keeping Justin Collins relevant to the story by being in his bedroom and looking for information with Melanie. Great job by Gordon Russell with the writing here.
Absolutely. So what are we looking forward to in 11/24?
I believe Jonathan Frid makes returning. Yeah, I believe Bramwell's in the next episode. So I think with this episode though here, it's great to see Dark Shadows always, and you can, for those who've never watched DS, you can go back to the beginning episodes and watch it. Just because a character's not in an episode, they'll often mention a character to keep him relevant, as Patrick has pointed out before. Sure. Really, just a great job by the writers and great job by the actors and actresses. And I love the fact too, man, Bob Cobert's composure of the trance is criminally underrated.
He's one of the major actors on the show. He doesn't get enough credit. That's his voice.
Where would you put him, say, to composers like Ennio Morricone and John Carpenter?
I would love to be able to have I would like to have access to the material that would allow me to really make that comparison. They're all writing very different types of things. This was studio music that he wrote a lot of that would later fit all sorts of situations.
Yeah.
I I actually like his more dynamic kind of disco funk stuff from the late 70s, his game show themes and his theme to Super Train. It's just he was able to imbue that stuff with a lot of fun and energy. I guess he wrote the music to Winds of War. I assume he did. He's very good at creating a broad, sweeping motif in just a few notes. Dark Shadows, da 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 da, Winds of War, da 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 da. That these are just immediately humanly evocative stretches of music. The guy who could talk about that, God, it would be great to get him on, be Jim Pearson, because I think Jim Pearson kind of got into the Dark Shadows world because he was studying and writing about music. Yeah. And that led him to focus on Bob Cobert.
I'd love to get him on and talk to him about it. It would be very cool.
It would be fun.
But with this, I like how. Oh, here's my question for you: If you could have picked Bob Cobert to compose a movie or something he never got to do, what would it be?
Probably something very sweeping and evocative, like Schindler's List. Some sort of very, very, very rich drama that could have a slightly old-fashioned sense of dramatic stakes and dignity.
Yeah, I'll pick two. Number one,
okay. Call Me in the Morning,
would be The Shadow, because I think that era he could have easily fit into it. And number two is a slightly different, though. I would have loved to see him compose something for an old Western, which would have been nice.
Sure. He would have flourished in both those genres.
Absolutely. Bob Cobert was just a super genius. I have the Dark Shadow CD. When I bought it, I put it right on my computer. So I'm always listening to it. It's so good.
It is.
But is there anything you want to add about this episode?
It was a good one. How soon do we get to 1690? Are we there yet?
No, I think it's episode 1236 that we're getting there.
Sweet midgets. We got 10 episodes to go. 13, 14, something like that. 12. I don't know. I'm just going to keep saying numbers until I get something right.
We're getting there.
It's interesting knowing where they're going, but not having seen this episode by episode in a few years, trying to figure out what are they going to do in between. Don't answer because we'll find out. But it makes you wonder. You really want them to cut to the chase, but they're good at filling things out before they get to that point.
Dark Shadows was always really good at leaving you wanting more. Even in this arc, I mean, they're basically going off the air, but they're still leaving you with wanting more with their storytelling here.
They certainly are. And so more we will have. When are we going to talk about this thing?
Let me see. What's today? Sunday. What are you doing? Let's schedule this. Let's schedule the next one for Tuesday night, because I don't know if I'm going to have a podcast Monday night.
Okay. Tuesday night it is.
So I'll see you Tuesday night for the next episode, 1200.
We are going for lunch.
Oh my God. I'll just say this before we get. It's really great to see. Here's Keith Prentice, who's been playing Morgan, and to see him have this much fun playing a different character, it just makes you appreciate the actor all the much more.
It does.
It really does. Link in it for the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound is going to be in the description box, guys. Go pick that bad boy up. Patrick, my friend, it is always a pleasure, sir.
You too. Have a great
night.
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.